right, you know that classic. Come on, 1970s, The Temptations. Number 3. Golly, I thought it was a number 1 with the number 3 in the pop charts. Ball of confusion. Of course, the lyrics back then mostly reflected the civil rights movement and all the things that were going on there. But some of these lyrics, they're still relevant today. I mean, some of this stuff, unfortunately, was still kind of dealing with young folks walking around with their heads in the sky, right? The sale of pills at an all-time high, all of this stuff, the city's ablaze in the summertime, the beat goes on. So I bring all of this up because a lot of folks are still trying to figure out what's going on with the bill, the big, beautiful bill, and of course it made it out of the House, barely, and now everyone's kind of wondering what it will look like when it's finally said and done, and will it actually be, we know it's big, but will it be beautiful? And in the eyes of everyone, is particularly on Wall Street. Senator Johnson saying it's going to pass. I'm going to bring in now Piper Sandler, Managing Director, also Senior Economist Jake Oubina, along with FHN, their Financial Chief Economist, Chris Lowe. Gentlemen, thanks a lot. So we're going to let's put up a checklist, because there were certain things that this was supposed to do, right? Obviously extend and make permanent the 2017 tax cuts. No problem there?
Looks good.
Looks good. Okay. Provide additional tax relief. Jake.
Yeah, I mean, some of this stuff is low-hanging fruit. Doesn't cost too much. Red meat for some of the constituencies. I think that's a check.
Do you like that?
I would say the one piece that probably would have been more expensive, no tax on Social Security, that didn't make the cut.
Right.
But yes, no tax on tips, it's in there. No tax on overtime is in there. And there's some relief for seniors.
Stimulate economic growth. Should Wall Street be happy with the final product?
I think the CapEx provisions in here are actually pretty decent. Early expensing of structures in particular.
That goes hand in hand with the notion of, hey, we're going to bring factories back and on-site back.
And you look at the economy over the course of the last 3.5 years, anything outside of tech in the capital investment space has basically been in a recession. And so you're putting stimulus on the things that you can revive here. I think that's probably going to get through.
You agree, I guess, Chris, with that?
Yeah, and really beneficial, too, to small business, right? Because you're extending those provisions for small business as well. That is a big job creator in the U.S.
So is this the part, reducing federal spending and deficits? Should we start with this? I mean, Jake, is this where it seems like there's a lot of arguing and finger pointing?
I'm not sure why, because the biggest reduction here on the Medicaid stuff is really a reversal of the emergency that you put on during COVID. You extended eligibility for a lot of people during the COVID emergency. We're spending $900 billion more than we were expected to on Medicaid. It's outpaced inflation. It's outpaced medical inflation. It's outpaced everything. So really, it's a rejigging back to something that looks more normal structurally. So I don't get the debate. I think the number is the right reduction. Again, it's going to run into some obstacles here.
Right.
In the Senate.
Right. And then remember, too, that there is revenue already from tariffs. And even if the tariffs stay at around 12% where they are now, that's another $2.3 trillion over 10 years that doesn't count in the CBO accounting in the budget.
How does that work, though? Okay, it doesn't count with the CBO. I mean, I guess when these politicians go out, how do they? I mean, does it count? Like when you do your work, Jake, for instance, how do you, how do we know what the deficit is? What number do we use if the CBO won't use the number?
Sure. I mean, I think the problem with tariffs is, and if we stayed right here today, 10% kind of across the board, we don't get the kind of relapse when the 90-day pause expires, et cetera. You're still going to have substitution effects that get you down from that sort of 12% effective rate. So it's really hard to say, hey, we're going to generate $200 billion more a year on a persistent basis. I think you could start your baseline that way, but the reality is you never end up there. And so I think it's a number that's kind of fraught.
I do think, though, if you're out talking to people and trying to put it into perspective, you start with the fact that deficit's been close to $2 trillion for 3 years, that it was 6.5% of GDP last year. Anything over 5% is not sustainable. So does this take you closer to 5? I think it does. But to Jake's point, it's not going to take you all the way there.
Advance key policy priorities. There are a lot of things in here, that maybe not normally would be in a budget. Pushing back on the courts, right? I mean, should that be in there? As an economic purist, Chris, would that be in there for you?
Well, I would have liked to see some of the stuff that DOJ found written into the bill, and it doesn't look like anything made it there. Maybe the Senate fixes some of it. But, it's really hard to make cuts, for example, administratively. It would be nice to have the legislature get behind it.
Is that just a function of politics? It's easier,
Yeah,
President Trump campaigned on one thing. These folks who are in D.C. want to be there forever.
And it's part of the deal-making process, right? It's really hard
Right.
to advance like super partisan policy priorities, I think, in a big spending bill like this.
So let's talk about the next wave, deregulation. Scott Besson out over the weekend talking about it. We want to play a clip from what he had to say.
As I mentioned, it's a three-legged stool, so I think it would be the third part, trade, tax, and deregulation. So deregulation is the slowest moving part. I would expect that to substantially kick in to the economic growth in the third, fourth quarters and really accelerate next year.
Chris, you like that timing?
Yeah, we've been looking at that as a 2026 thing. I do think it's potentially huge. I've talked to a lot of compliance people about what it might mean for finance. They're fairly excited about just the fact that it makes it easier for them to greenlight things that they're not sure about under the current alphabet soup of regulation.
It doesn't feel exciting, Jake, but it is, though.
It's slow moving, it's exciting, and it's huge, right? Regulation right now accounts for more than 10% of U.S. GDP on an annual basis. Over the last 4 years of the Biden administration, we added another 6.5% of GDP equivalent over a 10-year horizon. So it's expensive, and it's been getting more expensive. If we can pivot from that to something that's not only neutral, but deregulatory,
right.
These savings go right to the bottom line. It allows business to be more competitive.
We got less than a minute to go. Let's squeeze this in, though, because last week that bond auction went sideways. The market fell apart. Supplemental leverage ratio, it's not something everyone knows. It's even considered to be obscure. Nevertheless, it will allow banks maybe a chance to buy treasuries. I mean, how much of an impact would that make? I mean, because we keep hearing certain foreign countries are selling, not buying. And the big question is, who's going to buy our treasuries?
Sure. I mean, right now I'm not worried about where the 10-year is, given that funds are 4.3, the 10-year at right around 4.5. Not unhinged here by any stretch. What the SLR provision here does is it gives banks more capacity so they can own treasuries without it impacting their capital. Do they go out and lend? I think there still has to be opportunities for that to happen, but it does give them more balance sheet capacity. I think it's an important move in the right direction.
Right. And then when you have those hot spots in the market, when you have a bad auction, it means that the dealers can take down a bigger percentage. They used to take down 85% back in the early 90s. Now it's closer to about 15% of the auction. They would be able to step up those numbers, and it just means things would get less gummed up.
Hey, less gummed up. I love that one. Guys, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
That's the lesson of the day, less gummed up. All right, folks.